Our reading today is an excerpt from Organizing with Love by Adrienne Marie Brown. If love were the central practice of a new generation of organizers and spiritual leaders, it would have a massive impact on what was considered organizing. If the goal was to increase the love rather than winning or dominating a constant opponent, I think we could actually imagine liberation from constant oppression. We would suddenly be seeing everything we do, everyone we meet, not through the tactical eyes of war, but through eyes of love. We would see that there's no such thing as a blank canvas, an empty land, or a new idea, but everywhere there is complex, ancient, fertile ground full of potential. We would understand that the strength of our movement is in the strength of our relationships, which could only be measured by their depth. Scaling up would mean going deeper, being more vulnerable and more empathetic. What does depth require from us, from me? In my longing for depth, I have been re-rooting in the earth, in myself and my creativity, in my community, in my spiritual practices, honing in on work that is not only meaningful, but feels joyful, listening with less and less judgment to the ideas and efforts of others, having visions that are long-term. The pagan festival of Imbolc traditionally falls on February 1st, today in the Northern Hemisphere. And recognizes that when it is recognized when the first snowfall begins to melt. Timely, right? Imbolc is the quickening of the earth, quietly celebrated when the tree buds have not yet been seen nor the flower shoots emerged. It is a time of preparation when the seeds of all that is to come sprout roots, gather nutrients, and wait for the moment of their purpose to arrive. It would seem that every important change in our world begins with a quickening of sorts. The first time I felt flutters in my womb, it took another 2 months for anyone else to feel them. For those 2 months, her movements were a sacred and hidden treasure. With each subsequent pregnancy, the quickening came sooner, and thus, to my delight, the time of secret companioning stretched longer. Perhaps it took so long to arrive that first time because, unlike the seeds that lay wait underground, I did not know what to expect. I could not be sure that what I was feeling was the feeling I'd been waiting for, until it was so obvious I could not mistake it for anything else. Maybe it came sooner because over time I'd grown closer to my body, now understanding what to look for. Or maybe it was that my body remembered better each time how my heart soared at that first tiny kick and so brought it to me sooner, like a whispered reassurance saying, "Don't forget, when times get rough, and they will get rough, it will all be worth it in the end." I don't know. I just know that nothing made resiliency more real to me than those first few moments of feeling less alone. Most of you know that I answered the call, as Reverend Jennifer said, put out to clergy to go to Minneapolis a week and a half ago. As I arrived in Minnesota with over 1,000 of my interfaith colleagues from across the U.S., I once again did not know what to expect. We came prepared to go to work, to jump into action in any way that our facilitators asked us to, and we did do that. But the part of our purpose that we could not have known was that we were being called there to bear witness, so that we might learn to be midwives as the nation experiences its own quickening. You see, Minneapolis is that matriarch who has given birth to movements like this many, many times, and so is calm about it now. She has graciously invited us in to watch her use all her hard-won skills and wisdom as she labors and labors to deliver us a resistance. As we came to witness, the city held our hands, walked us through what it would be like, grieved anticipatorily with us, and taught us songs of strength and resilience as the full realization set in for us that if we do not stop it now, the government occupation of our cities is coming next, whether we are ready or not. Like any loving matriarch, she is passing along her wisdom because she wants us to be ready. And Minneapolis knows what it's doing. Their history of protest began in the late 19th century when the Great Northern Railroad strike began. Minnesota was the center of an 18-day labor action caused by months of continued wage cuts. And here I quote from an article by Katie Nicholson. That successful strike led to a nationwide railroad boycott known as the Pullman Strike and ultimately led to the establishment of Labor Day, signed into law by President Cleveland in the fall of 1894 as a national U.S. holiday. This is also the town where the major Teamsters strike of 1934 led Congress to pass the National Labor Relations Act a year later. Quoting from the same article, the Twin Cities also played a prominent role in the civil rights movement. In the late 1960s, an interracial coalition began forming in some neighborhoods, including the Black Power movement, the Brown Berets, part of the Chicano movement, which sought to empower Mexican Americans, and the American Indian movement, whose roots are in the north side of Minneapolis, end quote. In 2020, as we know, George Floyd was murdered by a police officer, and that strong history of grassroots organizing and community support was renewed. During my time there last week, I heard many of the organizers say, "No one is coming to save us. We save ourselves. We always have." It was clear to me that those in power who chose Minneapolis as the site to begin ramping up ICE presence were not students of history and had no idea who the hell they were messing with. I told you during our community conversation about social justice that history shows it takes just 3.5% of the population engaging in nonviolent protest to topple authoritarian regimes. What I didn't tell you was that 3.5% must engage in prolonged, sustained, nonviolent action, and that it must be thoroughly intergenerational, cross-cultural, involve laborers and unions, and must include disability activists. In other words, a movement's success depends upon the depth of its diversity. This is exactly what I saw in practice the Friday before last. It wasn't 3.5% of Minneapolis, it was tens of thousands of us, from children through to elders, who wrapped ourselves in clothing and took to the streets in negative 20-degree weather. Those who could not tolerate the freezing temperatures posted signs in the high-rises or lined the glass bridges that crisscrossed the city, cheering us on. The city shut down entirely during a planned economic blackout. Those restaurants that remained open to feed people gave 100% of their proceeds to supporting grassroots organizations working to feed, house, and provide legal aid to immigrants. The trains and buses never charged for admission. I marched alongside the Reverend Lori Stevens from Knoxville, whom some of you know, and a new friend, Reverend Roberta from Minnesota, a UU minister who'd been retired some 15 years earlier. Together we walked with people of every age, every gender, every race and culture. Whole unions showed up. I have been in some large marches and protests, but never anything of this size, and never any more cleanly planned and executed. There were no counter-protesters, not a single one. Not a single person was out on the streets for business as usual. Everyone I saw that day was either coming from or going to the march. The news makes Minneapolis look like a war zone, and in many ways it is. There are whistles and car horns going off constantly. There are unmarked squadrons driving around and abducting people, ripping children from their parents, dragging people out of their cars and assaulting those who are nearby and trying to intervene. Stay with me now. The images of violence strategically edited for us to consume, the language that we heard from the ICE agent after he shot Renee Good, language I cannot repeat from this pulpit, the execution of Preddy after he helped a woman push to the ground. This is the language and imagery of war, of racism, of patriarchy, and of misogyny. Those who support ICE's ramped up violence and have advocated for their continued immunity from the law have raged on about how this entire movement is being run by middle-aged moms. Have you heard that language? They're not wrong. But while these commenters say this fact as though the leadership of women somehow diminishes the efficacy of the movement, somehow makes it worthy of mockery, it is, in fact, the very reason this resistance is working. This is what the media doesn't show you. What Minneapolis has built is exactly what our reading today described: a matriarchal movement, one that centers the needs of and protects the most vulnerable: children, elders, the disabled, immigrants, and people of color, those without structural power. It emphasizes collective care. It is leaderful, so it does not require a figurehead and thus disregards ego altogether. This is a resistance that invites vulnerability, that honors grief, that acknowledges trauma's impact on a community, and deploys skilled listeners, counselors, therapists, artists, musicians, and clergy to attend to it. This movement learned from the successful movement work done throughout history, looked at where we are in the present, and adapted it to meet the needs of now. Because what worked in the past will not work now. It is still moving, shifting, adapting, changing every single day. While we were there, it shifted and changed multiple times. While they did play Rage Against the Machine and chanted things you couldn't pay me enough to repeat to you today, they also passed around hand and foot warmers. Warm, and I might add, delicious samosas, water bottles, hats, scarves, mittens. They checked on one another. They never crowded each other. They pointed out pouches of slick ice and extended hands to help one another over small mountains of snow. Never once, as we carried signs, as we walked the streets, went on patrols, sang in neighborhoods, took Lyft rides, never did we encounter anything but kindness and support. Like those seeds that spring to life when the warm sun finally rises, the entire city arose and was unified with purpose. Multiple times in the 2 days I was there wearing my stole and collar, Minnesotans came up to me and my colleagues, asked where we were from, and cried, literally cried, when they heard we had flown in from all over. "Thank you," one woman said to us at dinner Thursday night, "for coming all this way to be with us, for helping us feel less alone. You have no idea what it means to me, to us." We had been the first flutters of a quickening, that quiet companionship that reminded her and all of us that we are not alone and of our own resiliency. During the panel interviews, I had the opportunity to watch everyday people spoke about their experiences firsthand. A Lakota indigenous activist who helps patrol his neighborhood wept as he explained that as an atheist, he does not believe in a God. But one day, should there be a judgment and God asks him what he did to protect his neighbors from ICE, he wants to be able to say, "I was not perfect, but I did everything in my power." Another elder woman spoke about operating an emergency response phone tree. She told the story of getting a call from another friend who intervened when ICE broke down the door of a heavily pregnant woman alone in her home. She called requesting immediate counsel, and the volunteer arrived on scene and was pepper sprayed over and over and over and over again in the face. Even though she could not see, she did not leave and did not give up until the pregnant woman's counsel had arrived and ICE left without her. I heard from a woman who was late to the panel meeting because she was busy delivering donated breast milk to a 3-month-old whose mother had been snatched from the streets and deported. And another who had just woken up one day and decided to create a Google form to track the needs of her neighbors and match them with other neighbors who could meet those needs. In just 3 weeks, her Google form had grown to 1,500 volunteers and had received and handed out almost $300,000 worth of aid. She said one of her neighbors, an elderly man, had lost his wife and was frightened to leave his home for fear of being picked up and brutalized. So she said, so now he's a part of my family. She said, we bring him meals, we play card games together, we take his dogs for walks, we remind him we're here for him. She ended by saying, we don't need to pass around sign-up sheets to be able to know what to do. We all know how to be neighbors, so just do it. A similar sentiment was shared with me at the vigil this Friday. The Atlantic wrote about a term being coined from what we are seeing in Minneapolis, neighborism, a commitment to protecting the people around you no matter who they are or where they came from. The coalition of interfaith clergy, the networks of mutual aid and support, the strong intergenerational relationships in each neighborhood, the supportive and allied networks who came together, and the decentralized leadership, all of this was remarkable to witness. My colleagues and I frantically took notes, trying to make the most of this opportunity, and were eventually sorted into different categories: high risk and low risk. High risk were those clergy from in-state who likely held privilege and could risk arrest. The low-risk group was made out of out-of-state clergy who could not risk arrest for any number of very real reasons, but who could engage in symbolic actions and supportive actions. Those high-risk clergy, those were the ones who made national news being arrested at the airport. The low-risk clergy, we went on patrols, provided pastoral care, marched, sang, stood watch for Muslims entering the mosque for Friday prayers, or at immigrant-run restaurants and stores. There was no role that was more or less important because they were all necessary. Again, I say there is a place for everyone in the resistance. I stand in front of you today telling you that we are experiencing our own quickening here in Tennessee. Our state is being touted as a fertile ground to pass some of the most extreme anti-immigrant legislation in our nation. Those who see us this way forget that within this fertile ground there is a quickening of a different nature taking place. We are quietly spreading roots, gathering information, sharing wisdom, waiting for the moment of our purpose to arrive. I need you to know that all these people I learned from, they're no different than you or me. These networks were not created through some ethereal miracle. They were not prepackaged with instructions for assembly provided. They were created by mail carriers and teachers and nurses and stay-at-home parents and cashiers and grandparents and bank tellers who were engulfed by grief, seeing their neighbors and family members suffering. They were unwilling to tolerate the trampling of their constitutional rights for one more minute. Their courage kept them showing up for one another again and again every day. Our faith teaches us that faith without works is dead, that our prayers are hollow if they are not backed up by the work of love. Our matriarch, Minneapolis, is living proof that the human spirit, like the seedlings in the spring, is irrepressible. that none of us is free until all of us are free, that no matter how big ICE's already bloated budget is, no matter how many agents deep they roll, how many guns and weapons of violence they carry, how many divisions they try and sow, no matter how long it may take, love will win. I don't know about you, beloveds, but I'm in it for the long haul. I'm in it for your family, and I'm in it for my family. I hope you'll be part of that 3.5% and that you too will join in the quickening. You don't have to be brave. You can do it afraid. You can do it quaking with fear. Do it with a wavering voice. Do it with a face full of tears and a shattered heart. You will not be alone. Just listen hard for that quiet whisper which says, don't forget, no matter how rough it gets, and it will get rough, it will all be worth it in the end. The earth's first flutters of a quickening, that quiet companionship that reminds us of our own resiliency. May it be so. Amen. Ashe, and blessed be.